So welcome to Master Your Nerves, How to Shift Interview Anxiety into Confidence. So this is an overview of what we're going to unpack today. So 30 minutes, we're starting with really understanding the 5 different types of interview anxiety, what that looks like, how it shows up before, during, and after the interview. And then we're going to look at challenging your interview limiting beliefs, what that means, why we need to do that. And then step 3 is going to be building your interview anxiety reset routine. So putting this into action and really helping you feel more prepped before your next interview. So again, lots of stuff to go through today. But if you have questions, pop them in the chat and I'll just keep monitoring that. And then at the same time, you'll also receive the recording in 48 hours. And then at the end, I'll stay on for the call for like 10, 15 minutes or so. If anyone has any specific questions, we can just go from there. All right. So, really briefly about me, I am a PhD student in industrial organizational psychology, but I research interviews. So, I absolutely love them, find them really fascinating. And at the same time, I'm also a job interview coach. So, I help high achieving professionals who are struggling with interview anxiety. And that basically can look really different depending on where they are in their career, what their main holdups or roadblocks are. But I love taking what I've learned on the research side of things and putting it into action and helping job candidates actually land interviews. So, one big misconception I really want to tackle right off the bat is I used to think, and maybe you still do too, that interview anxiety is one thing where people either have it or they don't have it. And after working with a lot of different people and understanding how it can show up, we now know that interview anxiety is very complex. It's going to show up differently for each person. And that can be good because it helps you realize that, okay, there's so many different pieces to that. But also, I think that's what makes it really challenging, where maybe I'm struggling with interview anxiety in one capacity and my friend doesn't really understand this, but they also have interview anxiety to some capacity as well. So, what exactly does this look like? So, for example, I spoke with one candidate a couple of weeks ago, and before the interview, regularly he would think about sending an email to cancel because the idea of going through with the interview was so overwhelming to him that it was just easier to cancel it, prepare better for next time, and just relieve that anxiety. Maybe 5 minutes into the interview, I've also spoken with someone where they pick up on body language from the interviewer. They get this weird feeling. They think it's not going well, and they then proceed to just stumble through the rest of the interview based on what they're perceiving as, oh, this person doesn't like me, the interview's over, all of that. So, does anyone resonate with either of these scenarios? Is this something that you two are coming up with? Let me know in the chat. Um, why don't you type in the chat me with an exclamation mark if this is you. And if not, that's okay because we have a lot of different other examples of how this can show up. Michaela, we're hearing a me. Yeah. Jonathan, yeah. hmm And I think it saddens me a lot when I heard that this candidate was canceling interviews because of the anxiety and the impact that was having on him. Like that really hit me. Okay. Thanks for sharing this. So, step 1, naming your interview anxiety pattern. So, what is really neat is there's research actually looking at what is interview anxiety, what does this actually look like on the statistical side of things in the terms of basically I won't get too into it at all, but we know there's 5 types. So let's unpack each of them. Communication anxiety is kind of what it sounds like, but it's where you're really concerned with how you're expressing yourself. Oftentimes, if you've got language barriers, maybe a quiet voice, you're more introverted, there's a lot of fear of just, can I express myself in a way that really does my experience justice, but also I'm coming across as someone who sounds competent, who sounds intelligent. And that fear can add a lot of cognitive load to people as well. One note here, it's also nonverbal communication skills. So maybe, for example, you're really concerned with just like how you're actually presenting yourself with your hand gestures, with your eye contact, those kind of pieces. So I've got three examples for each of the five types. I won't read each of them. Again, you'll get the recording after. Um, but I'll just kind of like spotlight some of them. So at the root of communication anxiety, it's this fear about being able to explain yourself clearly. So, a common one that I see a lot is during the interview. You start answering a question halfway through, you're kind of thinking, I don't really know where this is going, I'm off track. So, maybe you apologize, you feel scattered, and then you're embarrassed about sounding scattered, and it just stresses you out. You get flustered. I'm sure many of us have been here before. Appearance anxiety. This one is very interesting. So it is just focused on anxiety regarding your physical appearance, how you're showing up, what you look like. And examples can include maybe your background, if you've got a virtual interview. Do you think that someone thinks you look like someone they should hire? So, a really common one is maybe after the interview or even during it, you screenshot yourself. I don't know if anyone's ever done this, and you're kind of analyzing all of the wrong things. You're looking at maybe how you're dressed, you're squinting at yourself, you feel like you look unprofessional, all of those things. When in actuality, I mean, really, yes, you need to dress professionally, but how much of that is going to be weighted by the interviewer and determining whether or not you're getting the job. Hopefully, very minimal. Social anxiety, so this is our third one, and remember we have five. So, social anxiety is really about that interaction with the other person, or maybe it's a group of people. So, feeling really awkward with the small talk, with the rapport. I think asynchronous video interviews is a huge area where social anxiety is just massive, where you don't have an interviewer behind the camera. If anyone's done that, let me know. I know it's really stressful. But that one is just, am I coming across in a way that really at the root of it, it's a desire to be liked for obvious reasons, but it's that cognitive load is huge for you. Um, so for example, afterwards, I think this is also really common where you ruminate on one tiny little thing that happened, and maybe you interrupted someone or you both talked at the same time, and then that's all you can fixate on. And or maybe you didn't laugh at their joke fast enough, and so that in itself is also stressing you out. Okay, how are we doing so far? Can I get a thumbs up if this is good. This is resonating with you. Excellent. Thanks, Alvin. All right. We still got some people in the waiting room, so come on in. Better late than never. Okay. So next, let's look at performance anxiety. So this is really the concern over being evaluated. And this is where people are viewing it as a test. They're viewing it as like a pass fail, high stakes consequences, all of those kind of things. Oftentimes, people will think, oh, if I fail this, my career is over. And while maybe technically you're not wrong, like if you don't pass the interview, your career can't grow, but that all or nothing binary thinking is not going to help you do well in the interview. So, oftentimes that can look like really bad sleep the night before the interview, or maybe during the interview when a really tough question comes. You feel the interview anxiety taking over. You're thinking, it's happening. I'm going blank. I'm choking. I can't handle this. And it's almost like you're fixated on the fact that the interview is just, it's a test, it's pass or fail, all of that. Johnson says performance with self-fulfilling. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's like you expect it not to go well, and so it doesn't go well. The other one I really like too, for this after the example, where you kind of see it as a zero-sum game, where it's like one good answer cancels out a bad answer, and so it's That is not how interviews are evaluated. It's on that holistic package of how well does the candidate fit for this role, but you're seeing it as, oh, this bad answer is going to be eliminated. It's going to eliminate me regardless of how many good answers I had. All right, number four, behavioral anxiety. Or sorry, I think this is number five. Behavioral anxiety is the very classic sweaty hands, you're feeling weak, heart's pounding. It's everything physical, and it's that autonomic arousal that you're experiencing because you're under pressure. And so often, what will happen with this is you're so concerned with the person or the interviewer seeing you fidget, seeing you look really nervous, that that is what you're concerned with. So, at the root of it, it's like they'll see how nervous I am and then reject me. Um, and that in itself is really stressful because sometimes it's hard to control sweating. It's hard to control exactly how you're behaviorally coming across. And then what'll happen during the interview is you're getting stuck in a loop where you're just trying to manage how you're physically reacting to the situation. And that in itself is taking up so much strain, and you can't focus on what you're saying. All right, so that was a lot of me talking. I want to hear from you. So totally feel free to come off mute, pop it in the chat. Which of these five is your biggest concern right now? So definitely type in the chat, and if anyone wants to elaborate, I would love to hear. Okay. Shelly says communication. Yes. Michaela's got performance and communication. Okay, looks like communication's coming up a lot. Performance. This is interesting. So again, so that performance piece is where you you feel like it's a test that you have to pass, and that in itself is stressing you out. So if anyone had test anxiety in undergrad, high school, that'll probably be related. A lot of performance, social. Jeffrey says social, fixating on one thing. Yes, I totally hear you. And I think too, if you tend to ruminate or fixate kind of in life on like a conversation you had, it like plays in your head before you go to sleep. I hear you. It's going to happen in the interview. Shay says performance. Mohammed says performance. This is great. Okay, so that's really interesting. So no one's struggling with appearance, eh? Which is, I mean, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. I think also when you look at appearance anxiety, you can control it more so than a lot of the other ones because you choose what you wear, how you present yourself. So that one kind of feels a little bit more in your control. I do remember speaking to one person, and I think especially for more corporate organizations where there's a big emphasis on like you have to look the part, you have to like these activities, you have to have, the purse or whatever. I think that can show up a lot for those folks in those types of interviews. All right, so why don't we move on then to step two? All right, challenge the story that it's telling you. What does this mean? So, limiting beliefs is genuinely one of my favorite topics in interviews because it is at the root of why we're experiencing the interview anxiety. So, in a nutshell, it's the idea that it's you tell yourself stories about who you are, about what other people think about you, how others see you. In an interview, it's going to be pretty common. And it sounds like protection because it's helping you perform your best, but actually it's inhibiting you from performing your best. That's really important. So, really common examples might be you thinking I'm not impressive enough for this role. If they ask me about my resume gap, I know I'm done for. The interview's over. I always blank out. I always choke in interviews. And what's really important is to understand that these feel like facts. They feel like the truth, but it's actually just predictions about your behavior. And that's such an important distinction, and we'll talk about why. But when we look at limiting beliefs, anxiety, it's gonna cause your anxiety to spike. So as we talked about before, your heart rate goes up, you're mentally rehearsing everything, And that is creating all of this tension. So, what do we know about the impact of anxiety on behavior change? It's exactly that. It's because we have these limiting beliefs that's causing the interview anxiety, which is causing certain outcomes in the interview, like we talked about. You're overthinking, you're freezing, all of those things. Okay, so what is the key thing here is recognizing that the performance dip or that evidence, sorry, the performance dip that you're experiencing is what we're using as evidence to make us think it's true. So that's kind of a mouthful. But basically, you had that belief that then created anxiety, which interfered with how you showed up in the interview, and we're now using this as proof that it's true. Is everyone with me so far? Any questions on this? Because I know it's kind of like psychological, but also it's kind of hard to like put your finger on it, especially when it's a newer concept, or maybe it's something you haven't considered when it comes to interviews. You haven't been able to dissect it. Any questions? Let me know. Shelly says spot on. I'm so glad. Alvin says self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, exactly. So that's exactly it, really. It's like the belief you have that I'm not good at interviews. We'll do a bunch of examples in a bit with everyone, but that is causing the interview anxiety, leading to the behavior shift, resulting in a mediocre performance, subpar performance, leading to a stronger belief. And so what we see happen is the more people are doing interviews, the harder it can get, the more discouraged they get. And it's just a really, really tough cycle to get out of. Okay. So I have so much content on this slide, but I'll keep moving forward because one of the key pieces is recognizing that we can all change our limiting beliefs, not even just about interviews, all aspects of life. What you're telling yourself can be changed. And one of the key things I see a lot, let me know if this resonates with you in the chat, but it's this idea of I hate faking it. I feel inauthentic. It feels, like I'm just trying to like boost myself for no reason. But that's not true because we know you've been invited to the interview for a reason. They think you are qualified for this role. They want to get to know you better. They're not wasting their time on you. So let's just take one example of a limiting belief here. So they're going to judge the gap in my employment. I have to hide it. Okay. We want to rewrite this into the idea that yes, they're probably going to notice your employment gap. It's a point of notice for them. Your goal is to reframe this in whatever way you need so that you can highlight the value you're bringing, all of that. And maybe it sounds basic, maybe you've heard it before, but it's a lot harder to do in practice. All right. So I definitely want to hear from everyone here. Maybe not everyone. Let's highlight a couple people. What is an example of a limiting belief you have about interviews that you are currently struggling with? And we're going to rework that together. So if anyone is bold enough to come off the chat, I would love to hear from you. If not, also no, absolutely no pressure. Pop it in the chat and we can discuss. Shelly, ooh, this is a good one. Okay, where are you, Shelly? Do you want to come off chat? Sorry, not chat. Come off mute and have a chat with me. Also, no pressure.
Sure, no problem.
Awesome. Okay, so you said here, am I giving the right example? So tell me what's going through your mind when you're having that thought.
It's probably from thinking that I need to have the perfect response. Am I packaging it correctly? And
Yes.
which, is going to give me, am I going to get an A plus on my response?
Yeah.
Is what that's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have that thought during the interview then?
In preparation,
Oh,
and
okay.
then yes, and then in reading body language
Yeah.
and trying to dissect the follow-up questions.
Yes. Okay. So let's just focus on the reading the body language because this is a common one that comes up. What do you pick up on that gives you the inkling of, oh, this is going well, this isn't going well, etc.?
Energy of
Hmm.
the interviewer, and do they have how engaged are they?
Okay.
And are they becoming more passive? Are they, are they curious about how, what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's really more around energy, and then reading facial expressions and body language, and
Yeah.
more so than the follow-up question.
Interesting. Yes. I totally hear what you're saying. And it is a big struggle for a lot of people because you're given very small number of cues in the interview. So you want to work with what they're giving you. So like you said, if they're giving you just kind of like negative energy, they're not interested, they're, dismissive, you're going to interpret that as, oh, I'm not giving the right answer. But what is the problem here is that we don't know what they're thinking. Could they be thinking that? Yes, possibly. However, for example, like I've worked as an interviewer, and Arabella, we will get to you right after. So thanks so much for raising your hand. I've worked as an interviewer before, and I really have tried to be so careful with how I'm coming across in the opposite way. So, for example, I'm really warm, friendly, nodding, affirming, even if they're giving the wrong answer and they're really off track and it's kind of absolutely not remotely close to what they should be saying. I mean, am I giving them incorrect body language? No, because I want everyone to feel like they're just able to feel comfortable so that they don't worry about how I'm presenting as the interviewer and whether they're doing a good job. So, kind of like unpacking everything you're saying here, I hear you. What I really want to challenge you and everyone on is removing the evaluation of the interview while you're in it. Think about it after, reflect on it after. In the moment, don't think, how is this going? It's going well, it's not going well. And that will help you just stay focused, stay present, and really just use all of your mental energy to feel like you're able to just do what you've prepared rather than start assessing and overthinking that. Does that make sense for you? How does that land for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Removing the narrative during the process,
Yeah.
removing that so that you can keep going and stay focused, and
Hmm.
as opposed to, what do it's almost like, what am I going to do with that information?
Yes.
If I
Yeah,
believe, in the moment, if that comes up, there really isn't anything that I can do with that information. So it's just,
exactly.
it's about, keeping on.
Yes. Well said. Really, really well said. Thank you. Thanks so much for going first. Let's
No,
go
thank you.
to Arabella because you've got your hand raised and then we'll pop over to the chat after.
Yeah, Madeline, I think one of the things was like, you might get this question like at the end, we're interviewing other people. And then as soon as I hear that, I think, okay, they're not set on you, right? And they
Mm,
probably, you know, they didn't pick you, right? And I find that
yeah.
I've got more than one data point on that. So that's a limiting belief. And
Mhm.
also, um, are you giving them enough information, right, which should actually be consulting advice? And I've experienced this where they've used it and they said, great work. But then
Mhm.
the next week they said, we'll give you feedback. But the next week they just said, okay, uh, we've we've just filled a position. So those are
Mm,
like, you think you're trying your best, right? And you
yeah.
give them like 20 pages, a pitch deck, even found that they want to invest around and they never
Yeah.
want such invest around, but you can't go back to them because it was a case study. But they were asking like such
Mhm.
interesting questions, and you thought that they would actually understand their own business than you do, but it seemed that
Yeah.
you understood their business. So you know
Yeah.
what? Are they just like baiting you for consulting advice, or
Yeah.
is it really genuine? Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much in here. So I'm seeing it as two kind of key themes. Your first part was about the comparison effect, let's call it. You know, they're interviewing other people. Where do you stand? The stress of that. And then part two is, okay, what's really going on? I'm giving them a lot of, I'm doing a lot of work for this interview. I'm giving them a lot of free advice, and then it leads to nothing. What's really the motivation for that going on? So, For the first one, this is a really important limiting belief that comes up a lot. And I was speaking with someone a couple weeks ago, and she said when her friend interviews for the same role, I think it's only happened once, maybe twice, she removed herself from the interview pool because she knew her friend was a lot more qualified, and then her friend didn't get the role. And so, what we need to remember, kind of similar to the last example, is we don't know what the interviewer is thinking. So we don't know who's the best fit for the job. We don't know everyone who they're interviewing. The
Mm.
expectation is if they're doing their due diligence, they're going to be interviewing more than one person. Why? Because you typically want to have a candidate that you're comparing against other people to know, is this the best fit that we can do, etc. So with this limiting belief, does anyone else have an idea about how can you shift that narrative so you kind of forget that other people are interviewing for the same role and you're competing with other people? Does anyone have any ideas on that? Feel free to pop it in the chat if it's easier. Because it's a tough one. It really is. I think especially I would say for so the example I was using was in I was speaking to some law students, so they were obviously in the same program, but same thing for any kind of program where your friends are competing for the same role. So with that one, to shift that limiting belief, honestly, it's as easy as it sounds. Is you have to focus on yourself. Don't worry about who else is interviewing for this. That's not your concern, that's their concern. What you're concerned with doing is showing up, doing the prep, and the outcome is what it is. Sometimes it's not in our control at all. Um, so that's kind of there's so much more to dive into for that, but oh, let's go to the chat here for a second. So Johnson says, I have a why not mentality. You fail, you're not better, and you are not any better than what you were. Yeah, absolutely. So building off of that, it's just the idea that, you know, even if you think, okay, there are more qualified people for this role, I know that. Let's just say you do have that thought. Why not put your hat in the ring? Is that the expression? Hat in the ring? I think so. I'm getting some nods. So why not? What do you stand to lose other than time and energy? But you're building off of that. So that was great. So I'm going to flip really quickly to part two. And your part two was really about, so you've done so much work for this, you've prepped, you've given them consulting advice. You can't go back after to maybe tailor your response. I have definitely seen this more than once where I just think that maybe people are being scammed. Like it's kind of a good gig when you think about it, where you have a whole bunch of organizations who are getting free information from desperate job candidates. And why wouldn't they tap into your very smart brain? So that's a whole other TED Talk level. So I won't like dive too much into that, but I'm really sorry that that has been your experience and that's stressing you out. So that's not okay by any means. So let's go quickly to the chat here. Let's just see anything else. So Jane says it's really hard to build rapport quickly. Yeah, 100%. And there's so much conflicting information about how much rapport should you build with candidates too, because there's a lot of room for, let's say, like biases, error, like, oh, we have the same hobbies, so now I've got a positive impression of you, all of that. Shay says getting to the last stages of interviews and not getting the role, so concerned about what mark am I not hitting. Totally, totally hear you, and that's so frustrating because it's success, 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 and then like just such limited feedback. All right. This is awesome. So, okay, Jane says she has to leave. No worries. I'll see you later. Okay, so we've got one more little section. So I have so many examples for each of the different ones. I'll just slide through this really quickly because I know we're getting close to time here. But for each of the different types of interview anxiety, I've got a limiting belief that it can show up. And then also how to shift that. Like, what do you need to rethink in order to work through that? Okay. So I love this one. If I fidget, I look incompetent. Become like pause, breathe, reset, look thoughtful, but also recognizing too that you're going to be nervous. It's okay to be nervous. That's going to come across physically as well. So, the final step of this is building your interview anxiety reset routine. And what does this really mean? My goal is that you've got some tools in your tool belt to help regulate your nervous system and reset your focus the next time you're entering into an interview. So, what this really is in a nutshell is just a consistent sequence that you're doing before the interview. So your body learns we're safe, we know this pattern, we're prepared, we're feeling good. And there's so much about grounding yourself and really being present that can help with a lot of this, not just interview anxiety, but anxiety in general. So, okay, I've got four different pieces here, and I'm hoping that at least one of them will land with you. And I mean, we're like you can always integrate all four aspects into this routine so that you've got a really well-rounded bucket here. So, what is visualization? Sounds woo-woo, it works. Used so often in sports performance, public speaking prep, all of those things. And you're really taking the time, intentional effort to close your eyes. You're sitting in your car, you're sitting before you log into Zoom. You are rehearsing how you're feeling, how your body's responding before the interview. And so it's not just like what I'm going to say, it's how do I feel after a good response? What are the sensations that's going on? And all of these aspects lead your body to feel more calm. So what often happens is it's rushed, you're panicked, maybe you're cramming last minute, you're reading your resume, but like starting off with that focused mental clarity is really, really important. We know too, what I think is so interesting, our brain responds to imagine rehearsal almost like it's real. Like your brain basically can't differentiate it, which is kind of wild when you think about it. So, what you're training your brain to do is become associated with that familiarity of calmly responding to a question, owning that pause. Maybe even you're asked a question you don't know and you're not panicking. You're sitting in that feeling of, I'm going to think about this. Okay. What it really does is it combats that first time feeling in an interview where you're taken off guard because you haven't experienced that before. Number two, the physiological reset. This one, most of you, I'm assuming, maybe have heard of this. Box breathing, really common for slowing down and just focusing better. This is where we're going to do this together. So you're breathing in for 4 beats. Sorry, there's a typo there, but you know what I mean. You're holding for 4, and then you're releasing for 4 and holding for 4. So you're thinking of it as a box. So again, going back to our visualization, we're breathing in for 4. So holding out and in. And you're doing that, let's say like 5 to 10 times. And the way that it calms you down is wild. And what's really beautiful with that is like you can do this anywhere. You can do it in an airplane. You can do it right before you walk in. Let's say there's other people there. You don't want to look like you're insane, which is probably smart. You can do this and it's kind of subtle. And it's just signaling as you're exhaling that everything's going to be okay. Number 3 is reading what I call your proof bank recall. So you're reading 3 quick wins, or you're just kind of recalling 3 quick wins that you've had. And why is this important? Because it's the evidence and the proof you need that you've earned this interview. So those thoughts of like, why am I here? Why did they ask me to be here? I'm going to mess this up. I've messed this up every time. No, what are 3 wins that you're really proud of over your career path? Maybe even in past interviews, like interviews that went well. That's a win. Very last one is what we're calling the first question rep. So this one is kind of interesting because, again, it's really just that authentic, let's build the confidence that is real in a way that's just going to pump you up a little bit. So what you want to really think about beforehand is your response to this answer. So, in the first 90 days, the most valuable thing I can do for you in this role is XYZ, and here's why. And really, this is kind of your prep for the tell me about yourself question, just maybe not as specific, but it's like who you are, why you're here, what you can contribute to this role. And again, that's just going to help you feel a little bit more um kind of like in the zone of engaging in that self-promotion, feeling authentic, and yeah, just starting off on a good foot. Okay, so 11:37. So we did a pretty good job. So thank you so much for showing up, for participating, for coming out. I have a next step for you if you are struggling with high achieving, not high achieving, interview anxiety as a high achiever. I have been speaking with basically exactly your profile over the past 6 months. So if you want to have a one-on-one combo with me, completely free, there's no like sales or pitch at the end. I've spoken with 25 candidates so far, have learned so much, seen a lot of common patterns, ones that we talked about today. And let me know if this is something you're interested in. So I've got the calendar there. Book a call. What we're really looking at is what you are doing in your interview prep that's not working for you. What are your mindset roadblocks? And then I just want to help you understand like what can you be doing differently to just help you push past this interview bottleneck situation. And yeah, that's really it. So I'm gonna stay on the call if there's any questions. More than happy to chat about this. If not, feel free to hop off and I'll send you the link in about 48 hours. Thanks so much, Michaela. So glad to hear that. But yeah, really appreciate you coming out and hopefully this resonated with you on a lot of different levels too. We covered a lot in 30 minutes.